他是1999年诺贝尔经济学奖获得者，他是最优货币区理论的奠基人以及供应学派的倡导者。他曾撰写了大量关于国际货币制度史的文章，对欧元的创立起了重要的作用，被誉为欧元之父。他会如何看待中国建立上海自贸区的意义？
I don't think it'll have a big effect on the world.
他对中国经济有何看法？
And in order to do that, to the extent that there's some loss of export markets, you can fill the gap by having Chinese buy their own goods. So you increase the incomes of people.
他又如何看待中国的楼市泡沫？
But I think I've heard things he said about bubbles all around the world, and I think I don't believe that he's right on that.
网易财经意见中国对话美国哥伦比亚大学经济学教授罗伯特·蒙代尔，精彩内容即将呈现。
Well, my view is that it's not going to have any great immediate effect on the world economy. I think the most important effect it might have first is that it'll have firms lining up to become part of this area. It looks like it's not quite clear what the advantages are going to be, but I'm sure they're all the big companies and firms and banks are going to want to be part of this area. So I think that can cause some influx of capital that'll have some effect on China. I don't think it'll have a big effect on the world. And I think what you'll find is that people will take a wait-and-see attitude to see just what exactly it's going to mean, who's going to be allowed into it, and and what the conditions for them coming in are, and if it's going to be complete free trade or is it going to be partial free trade. I think all those things are very relevant. Well, I think this is a very good time for internationalization. I think that internationalization is something that normally comes from the side of demand, from the side of countries that want to use the RMB. Certainly there'll be those exporters that China trades with, in which they can invoice some of their products in Chinese RMB, and I think that's a good way to increase the demand for it. I don't know if there's been much directly from the standpoint of capital movement on the capital account, because that's the barrier to China at the moment. My own view is that that big steps in this, in order to make China, the utilization of the RMB internationally proportionate to China's share in world trade, is going to take pretty big steps, like a movement toward convertibility. Well, the process would be, the main part of the process would be to make it more liquid. Because the big thing about a currency, if the rest of the world wants to get a currency and they hold RMB, they want to know that it's easy to transfer into other currencies or to spend. And that's the key element. So it's got to be a step that tends to remove exchange controls from the Chinese capital account. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that China should do that overnight, quickly like that, but I think that they should experiment with a more rapid approach by increasing the allotment that people can shift abroad in accounts, and that's the way I would approach it. I think more likely I've said 2030 or for, and I look up and when I see what I've said from the past, I see that's more or less what I would have said. But I think that China's economy has slowed down a little bit, but I think that it doesn't have to slow down very much over this period. I think that the big question is to maintain sufficient adequate demand for Chinese goods. And in order to do that, to the extent that there's some loss of export markets, you can fill the gap by having Chinese Chinese buy their own goods. So if you increase the incomes of people at the lower end of the spectrum, this will increase total demand. I think that the dollar has been used as the main global unit of account since about 1916. So it's reaching almost 100 years that people have got used to using the dollar as the unit of account. It takes a long time for people to convert to a different currency before they change the mindset and they use that mentally. The pound sterling was used after the American Revolution. The Americans threw out the pound sterling and they used the dollar. But 30 years afterwards, people inside the United States were still thinking mentally in terms of the pounds, shillings, and pence system. So it's quite a long time it changes. Now, I'm not going to exaggerate this fact, but I think that the unit of account will stay with the dollar for several decades to come. But China may gradually become a big part of the countries producing the world currency. Right now, of course, they're a small part, but that will grow after China becomes larger than the United States, which we can expect in 2025. That's 12 years from now. It's the existing stock of reserves that China has is very large. But so the impact on the Chinese economy is not very large, but it's a little bit like your government having a large bank balance. And that's a very favorable position because it gives the country a lot more power to do a lot of the things. And when it goes around the world, it gives it more power to help other countries or to make deals and contracts in different ways. And it increases the prestige of China to be the country in the world with the largest foreign exchange reserves and still growing. No, I like Robert Scheer very much, but I don't. I think I've heard things he said about bubbles all around the world, and I think I don't believe that he's right on that. I think I'd like to see them find a way to, through their tax or spending system, to increase consumption in the Chinese economy on the fiscal side. And I believe that China could do with a somewhat not so stringent a monetary policy. The only thing that I think should resist any change in increase in the money supply would be a threat of inflation.